Hello class. Today I'm going to show you how to make an animal head, like for a wall sculpture. So I have the back being fairly flat, and I am just working on shaping the clay, kind of like when we were making the pinch mug, except that I'm trying to have it be smaller down here, and then the head will come up here. The head that I'm going to make is actually a chicken head, a hen. It'll start with kind of like the breast area here, and it'll get smaller and smaller to their teeny tiny little head. So I'm going to press my thumb in the center. And something you need to know is we want to keep the walls really thin. So not paper thin, because then you won't be able to control it or smooth it, but we want to keep it around under a ½ inch for sure, because otherwise it'll be so heavy for the wall. And then more likely more like a 1/4 of an inch if you can, or less. But if it gets too thin, paper thin, you're going to tear through and there's going to be other issues. So I'm going to turn it while pinching from this bottom up. And I actually don't mind my finger marks from pinching, because the chickens have feathers, and those feathers have a texture of their own. And although we'll be doing some more underglazing and carving with this, I think that it'll be nice to have some deeper thumb marks and finger marks from pinching. This isn't quite there. This is about how thick it is right now, and I need to do more. So now I'm pinching and feeling where it's thicker and moving that clay up. All right. Now this isn't quite tall enough for me. I feel like it needs to be a bit taller. So I'm going to add a coil, and that's okay that it's going to sit on what's going to be the head, because eventually I'm going to shape that too, but right now it can just sit there. And that part of it is pretty thick, so just give you an idea, it should be right around a ½ inch thick if I'm going to open it up and do some more work to it. Now I'm going to make this just a little bit wider, and I'm going to use our rib for that, our red rib, and I'm just going to press into my hand. And what I'm doing is I'm making it wider, and I'm also thinning the walls. So when it gets wider, the walls become thinner, or if it gets smaller, the walls become thicker. And so that's going to really help out. Now you can see that the walls are under a 1/4 inch thick. All right, I'm going to wet the lip, and I'm going to make a coil. Remember, from the pinch mug, you can make coils in a few different ways. I think students usually like rolling it on the table. So as a reminder about that, you'll start in the center and then span your hands out. Start in the center and span your hands out. Like that. Now I'm going to flatten it, but not just with the heel of my hand, and not paper thin, but the thickness of the lip I'm attaching it to. I don't want to put the coil on top of the lip. I want to put it on the inside and down just like an 1/8 of an inch. So not very far, just a little bit down. And I just kind of pinch that on as I go all the way around. All right. Then on the inside, I'm going to press that coil down, connecting it on the inside. And then on the outside, I'm going to pull it up. And again, I am not really smoothing this a lot with my rib like we did with the mug, because it's going to have a texture and it's going to have some shape to it, and I don't mind that. I am going to, though, connect it on the inside. All right. Now, I want to connect this to a little slab. So I'm going to make kind of a pancake. And the way that I do that, usually I can use a rolling pin, or a lot of times I'll just throw that at an angle until it thins out. The reason I do that, just as easy as using a rolling pin, and it takes a little bit less time, I think. Now I'm adding some water, and that's making a slip on the surface where I'm going to be attaching this. And I'm just going to fan this out just a little bit. And the reason I want to put this on a little slab, put a back on it, is for two reasons. I'm going to be cutting a keyhole into it eventually for hanging it on the wall, but also the air inside of this is going to help me when I start to model the shape. So I'm just connecting that on there, and then I'm going to find my needle tool. Oh, there it is. And I'm going to cut the extra away. And I'm not trying to make this a perfect circle. There we go. I am going to connect this just a little bit more though. Just bringing that cut off part up. Sharp edges with clay can be trouble. They can chip and cause problems. I don't want that to happen. All right, now I am just going to smooth that just a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect because I'm going to be doing a lot of carving on this. Now, I'm looking at this is where it's going to be on a wall, and so I want to start going through the top here and create the chicken head. So I'm making a hole, and I'm going to pinch that up. And that's doing two things. It's giving me a kind of a smaller area for the head, because the chickens have teeny tiny little heads and teeny tiny little brains. And I'm going to then bring that in. Now you can, sometimes if you want something to go in a little bit faster, you can use a paddle. Or you can simply change the angle of your hand and pinch inward. So remember that angle of your hand is still very important. Okay, now I'm going to take this and I'm going to do a method that you can kind of see the shape of the beak taking place, but I am going to do something that I do when I make handles, and that is I'm going to pull this a bit. And there we go. And I'm just going to mark off where that comb is going to be. Not comb, but I think they call that wattle. And then I'm moving some clay up to create the comb. I think I'm going to add just a little bit on there. Even hens have comb. You know, people always think roosters do, but they're not alone. All right, now I'm going to add just a little bit on for an eye on each side. And I can work on that just a little bit more. You notice I'm not really using a lot of tools. I'm using mostly my fingers to do a lot of the work. And I think with sculpting that's important. Also, I think adding on too many things, like pulling out the beak instead of adding it on, is a good idea. I think that when you add less on, you have less troubles with things breaking back off. Now, this is the start of it. I'm not completely enamored with the angle of that neck. So you see what I'm doing here? I'm pushing this and squeezing it, and we're kind of pinching it. And that's going to change that shape. So instead of just adding on or carving away, which I will do eventually, right now I'm just going to kind of shape it by modeling it, pinching, moving the clay until it looks the way I want it to look. I'm going to turn it around this side. go. And I don't use a lot of water. I think I see people using so much water with clay, and it does have its place, but sometimes it's too much. And it gets so wet that it can't, you have troubles with friction. You can't get any friction or move the clay because it gets too wet. Right now, I'm just mapping out where the wings are going to be, and so instead of adding the wings on, and I know that's what people think they should do, but you can push in, you can kind of create a line with your finger and push in, and that's going to force this out. And then I can come back in with my side of my finger, and I'm just creating some kind of feathers. And I can come back and do some carving on this later, but on this side I want to do the same as I did on the other side, kind of mirror that. And all that air inside from that bottom that we attached on is helping hold that so that I can do all this pushing and pulling, and it holds its shape. There are tools that you can use, carving tools, and I'm going to come back in with those after I apply some underglaze. But for now, this is just mapping out where all of that's going to go and also adding some texture to it. All right, now I think what I'd like to do is let this set up. Now this is what it's going to look like when I put it on a wall. So if I want the head to angle up, I may have to move that a little bit. That looks just a little bit better, I think. And I can put this down, face down, and let that set up for a little while. And then I can come back in and make a keyhole, and we can do some underglazing in part 2. Thank you. That was pretty easy, huh?